Hello and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast by movie nerds for movie nerds, where we take the movies out there that maybe need a little more love in the world, a little more attention, and we try to introduce them to a new audience. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and we got a very special show for you today. We have a movie that I'll save the surprise for you once we get to it. But let me introduce my guest here. We're going to talk about a movie called 3 O'Clock High from the mid 80s, I think late 80s, 1987, 88. And my guest here today, he's a good friend of mine. We go back a long way. We met at a reality TV event a couple years ago. His name is Randy Bailey, and welcome to the show, Randy. Let's talk about this one.
Hey, what's going on, Mario?
Randy doesn't know this because I'm going to surprise him with something, but he may not remember he ever told me this. But, I kind of talk out of my butt from time to time. You may have noticed that, I know every movie ever made. I'm like this expert on obscure movies. But Randy, I remember the first time I met him, I told him, I'm the big movie guy. I love this. I love all these movies. I'm the guy who knows everything. And Randy's like, Junior, I was doing that when you were like 5 years old. I was memorizing movie quotes long before you were doing it. So, Randy, I'm so proud to have you on the show because you were like my mentor now. You were someone that was doing this before I was doing it.
What? I don't remember that conversation, but if you said it happened, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and nobody's ever told me that before because I can be a bit much. I can be a little overbearing, and you just basically said flat out, bring me on the show and I'll introduce you to some movies. And that's what I love about this is that Randy and I had talked about a movie that we thought would be good for the show, something that was underloved or underrated. And he said, well, how about 3 O'Clock High? That's a good one that not a lot of people know. And I was like, okay, that's good. And I'm thinking, I've never even heard of that movie before. So Randy backed up his words here by pulling out a movie out of his butt that I'd never even heard of.
And a good movie at that.
It is a good movie. And I watched it. I rented it about 2 months ago and watched it for the first time. We recently watched it a second and third time. And I really like it. Like, I'm really happy you introduced this movie to me because it's very rare that someone can pull a movie from the 80s that I'd never heard of before.
How do you rent movies nowadays? I thought that was a thing of the past.
Yeah, there's one Blockbuster still up in Alaska. I have a card there, a membership.
Are you serious?
No, I'm not serious. I got it from Netflix. They have it on Netflix on the DVD. I'm still on the DVD plan where they ship me physical DVDs. So
they have it. It comes in and out on Netflix on the streaming.
Okay.
I went to Pirate Bay and downloaded it.
Okay, yeah. For the rest of the world that uses streaming, listen to Randy. Don't listen to me. I can only tell you how to get the physical DVD.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pay to rent a movie.
Okay, so I need to get your back history. Like, how do you know so many movies? Like you said, you kind of, put me in my place that one time saying that you were doing this long before I was. How did you get to acquire such a vast library of movies in your head?
When I lived in Texas, I've lived probably half my life in Texas, and I owned a couple of restaurants that were doing pretty well, believe it or not. And I'd work 10 or 15-hour work weeks. And that gave me a lot of time to lay on the sofa. And this was actually when Blockbuster was open. Mm. I'd go through 2-3 movies a day usually, at least. And,
so this would be late 80s, somewhere in there?
This was probably 85 to, probably for a decade, through 95, 98, somewhere like there. Then I lost all my money and had to work for a living. So I don't still watch a lot of movies, but not like I used to.
But you will always have those glory years when you could watch VHS from Blockbuster endlessly.
And yeah, as well as Showtime and HBO. And yeah, my life is kind of backwards. I was kind of retired in my 20s and 30s. And now that I'm old, I have to work for a living. So.
Well, I'm glad you're here to talk about your glory days back in the 80s.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, this is something I had mentioned in my promo episode, that how I really acquired this knowledge of movies is by just the sheer fact that I was an unpopular kid who didn't like hanging out with other people. So I would always just rent movies and go home and watch them by myself or with my brother. And there was this video store, this place called Hollywood Video, not related to the chain. It was just a independent.
I remember it.
Yeah. But it was they had this special, I know, at one point in the 80s where it was like you can rent any 7 movies for 7 nights for $7 as long as they weren't a new release. And that's how I would just pick up these random movies that you never would watch otherwise. But I'm like, well, for $1, I'll watch that. Okay. And so I'm assuming you had similar phases like that where you just would watch these movies endlessly. And it sounds like you kind of would just pick them up like I did, where they would lodge in your head and you wouldn't forget them.
I can remember going to Blockbuster and renting 2 movies a day. And they were like $2 or $3 a piece. And going back the next day, and I think it was a 3-day rental, and if you returned them after one day, you got $1 off new rentals or whatever. And I can remember with my VCR eating the tape of a VHS, and the Blockbuster charging me like $60.
Yeah, those tape prices were insane.
Oh, they were crazy. This one movie, it wasn't even a great movie. It was just because I watched every single movie that ever came out, and it cost me $80 because my VCR ate it. So
now somewhere on your credit record it says that you paid $80 for a copy of Grease 2.
It wasn't that bad of a movie, but it was. What was that movie about air traffic controllers? With Billy Bob Thornton, I think. Yeah,
that was I do remember seeing that. Yeah, there was like a love triangle of air traffic controllers.
Yeah, I can't remember the name, but that's what my VCR ate, and it ended up costing me $100. So, and now I download anything for free on Pirate Bay or Netflix has got plenty of stuff, but.
Yeah, good times in the 80s. Going to the Blockbuster, and sometimes you had to rent the VCR. That was the other thing. I mean, clearly, with you were rolling around in money at the time, you didn't need to. But like, my family would sometimes have to rent the physical VCR along with renting the movie. So, good time. Yeah, it was like in a little suitcase. It was like you were like a spy. It opened up, and there was a VCR in there.
Yeah, I can remember borrowing my neighbor's VCR whenever I had a movie that I wanted my own personal copy, and record VCR to VCR, and after about 5 plays, all you're looking at is snow on the screen.
Yeah,
I had a giant drawer like 6 feet long and 3 feet deep that I probably had 200 or 300 VCR movies in it. I just threw all those away, a decade ago.
Yeah. See, these younger people don't realize the struggle that we went through in the 80s just to get entertainment in our house.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about 3 O'Clock High. Again, this is one that I thought, there's a lot of 80s movies I knew about and never seen, and I'm embarrassed to say, like, I just saw Footloose for the first time like 2 years ago, but I knew about it. But 3 O'Clock High just completely was over my head. You had mentioned it, and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. And I looked it up, and it says, yeah, it's basically a Western. They took a Western movie, and they set it in an 80s high school. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. It's kind of quirky. Like, how did you know about this movie? You weren't in high school when this came out, so you wouldn't have been the prime demographic for this movie.
No, I think I saw it on like Showtime or HBO, 2 or 3 years after it was in theaters. And I just saw it by accident. It was great. I've probably seen it 6 or 8 times now.
Yeah, it's really good. And again, the first time I watched it, just like a couple weeks ago, I was like, well, that was kind of good. Like, I wouldn't call it like one of the best movies of the 80s, but it was quirky. Like, it's got a distinct style to it. Yeah,
it's not a Titanic or anything, but it's a good movie. I just realized today, after knowing about this movie for decades and seeing it several times, it dawned on me today that the title is a play on words.
Ah, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, I just realized that a couple hours ago when I was thinking about doing this podcast with you. You remember the movie High Noon?
Yes, absolutely.
And 3 O'Clock High. I'm not going to explain the play on words, but you see it.
Mm-hmm. High Noon, right there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think we're kind of selling movies to people that wouldn't have seen them. And this is going to be one of the more obscure movies we've talked about on Staff Picks. And that's kind of the thing that people need to know before you watch this movie. It indeed is High Noon. It's a Western where there's a big gunfight at noon or at 3 o'clock in this movie. And it's basically a kid and the bully. They're going to fight. And it's the whole day leading up to the whole day leading up to this fight. And this kid is terrified. He's going to get his ass kicked at 3 o'clock. But the weirdest thing is how quirky it is. Like, we did an episode a while back on My Bodyguard. You know My Bodyguard, right? From 1980?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's funny to compare that movie to this movie where they're both, a new kid in school, big scary guy. There's a bully. There's a little kid. They're very similar, but it's weird because like the difference between what a teen movie looked like in 1980 versus this one, which I think is 1988 or 89, what a teen movie looked like then.
87.
87, that was it. Yeah. So in 7 years, that's what the teen movie genre looked like. It changed. By the end of the 80s, it was much more quirky, stylistic, just flashy. And that's one thing that really jumps out at me when I watch this movie, what a product of its time it is.
Well, the movie My Bodyguard and other teen movies in the 80s, like a lot of them, they were all realistic, and everything that happened could actually happen. 3 O'Clock High is more of a fantasy. There's a lot of things that just there's no way they're going to happen, which makes it, like you said, quirky and funny.
The one thing that really jumped out at me when I watched this, did you ever see the TV show Parker Lewis Can't Lose in the late 80s, early 90s?
No, never even heard of it.
Okay, it was this Fox show, and it was very quirky, bright colors, stylistic, flash, MTV jump cuts. Very much like this movie. 3 O'Clock High, for people who know Parker Lewis Can't Lose, this is kind of like the precursor to Parker Lewis Can't Lose, that style of a teen comedy, teen show. It really jumped out at me. Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. It's like comedic editing.
Yes.
It's not funny just because what's happening is funny. The editing and the sound effects and stuff is brilliant, which makes it 10 times more funny.
Yeah, and it's kind of a little masterpiece in its own way. Although, again, I wouldn't call this like the best 80s teen movie I've ever seen. But I can't really think of anything other than the obvious My Bodyguard where it really compares to it. It's its own thing.
Just thinking about some of the scenes in it makes me giggle. My two favorite scenes, and with my video editing background, I can really appreciate this movie. I edited weddings for 10 years, and I've done some other professional editing. But the two scenes that stick out to me is the one scene where Jerry Mitchell is in, I think he's in either the head of security's office or the principal's office, and he sits down and he's just intimidated by his surroundings, and they show all these stuffed heads on the wall with screams and gunshots and stuff added in, and I can't explain how funny the editing is. You have to see it. Do you remember the scene?
I know exactly which scene you're talking about. It's all this over the top giant head staring down at him, and they just do these zoom cuts and close ups and try to make it look super ominous. And meanwhile, he's just in the principal's office.
Right, and the other scene that is so funny is where he takes the note that was stabbed into his steering wheel, and he's trying to he's pulling it out of his pocket to show the head of security, and a gust of wind blows it away, and they cut to a scene of the piece of paper being blown into the stadium, and they have a sound effect of the wind. It's just hilarious. The editing is great.
Yeah, there was apparently a tornado at that moment that really took that piece of paper and blew it up into the air.
And do you recall that scene that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly, when the Duke comes and confronts him against the fence.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Do you know the history behind this movie, like how it got made? I was reading up on this one about how Steven Spielberg was involved and stuff. Like, are you aware of all that? I thought it was pretty funny.
Not all of it. I didn't know Steven Spielberg was involved.
Okay, good. Now I get to teach you something. I'm so excited. Since you gave me the gift of 3 O'Clock High, I will give you this gift. So basically, Steven Spielberg was the producer of this movie, and he hired this first-time director. What was the guy's name? His name was Phil Janu or something like that. And basically the plan was this was supposed to be like The Karate Kid. It was just supposed to be a very straight high school teen movie. Like the young guy stands up against the bully. And then this guy, Janu, took it and said, well, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do something crazy with it. And he made turned it into a Western. He turned it into an homage to Martin Scorsese's After Hours. You've seen that movie?
I have not.
Okay, that's this crazy movie.
I'm not a Scorsese fan.
Okay, neither am I, to be honest. So I'm glad you said that. So I'm not the only one here. But yeah, it's this crazy over-the-top thing. So Steven Spielberg took a look at this movie after Janu made it, and he's like, I wanted The Karate Kid. You gave me a Scorsese movie. And he basically took his name off the credits. So Steven Spielberg, a lot of people don't know he was involved with it. And so this movie didn't do well because it was too quirky. It was not conventional. And so that's kind of the history behind it, that this guy just created his own little work of art and kind of ticked off Steven Spielberg.
So you did look into it. It did not do well at the box office?
It did not do especially well, no. I mean, it wasn't like a historic flop, but it clearly wasn't like E.T. or The Goonies or anything.
Yeah, and for the first time, as many times as I've seen this movie and as much as I know about it, I did not do the parallel to an old Western, but I totally see that now that you bring that up. It's the slow motion shots like at the beginning in the bathroom where Jerry Mitchell slaps Buddy Revell on the shoulder. And when Buddy Revell is like looking down at his hand, touching his shoulder, it's just super slow motion with ominous music, just like a gunfight.
Yeah, and they also have the recurring theme in this movie of the clock. They show the clock ticking. It's very ominous, and which is exactly in a Western, you'd see the big clock in the middle of town clicking down until the gunfight.
Right, and another reason this movie hits home for me is I remember it was 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th grade. This school bully was going to kick my ass, and he wanted to meet me. Instead of the flagpole, we had this little area across from the school called the Path, and that's where people went to fight. And I can remember, saying all kinds of stuff like, dude, I have no reason to fight you, which in reality is I'm scared shitless.
Yeah, I'm going to lose.
Yeah. And anyway, I made it through the whole day. Just, the 7-hour day seemed like it lasted 7 years. And then, 30 minutes left in the day, I just went to the principal's office and tattled.
You pushed out.
I did. And to this day, I regret it. Because of this movie, 3 O'Clock High, I wish I had, at least gotten my ass kicked.
Well, if you'd like, Randy, maybe I can look up the name of the bully and we can arrange some kind of reunion. So maybe you can get the ass beating that you always deserved.
I got my share of ass beatings. It just wasn't this time. Okay.
So this one in particular you missed out on. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was. I always talk about this when we talk about the 80s movies on the show. Just what a significant part of your life that was when you were a kid in school back in the 70s and 80s. Just knowing who the bullies were, knowing not to piss them off, and knowing where not to go after school, because if you got caught there, you were going to get your ass kicked.
And do you know a little bit about the two actors that played Jerry Mitchell and Buddy Revell?
I do. I've been reading up on them a lot. Yeah, Casey Shimachko and what's his name?
Richard Tyson is the guy's name.
Yeah, Richard Tyson. Yeah, okay.
And I looked at his IMDb today before this podcast, and he has done dozens and dozens of things. I mean, if not hundreds of things. His claim to fame was Kindergarten Cop with Schwarzenegger, but he has done, like I said, probably 100 things. I couldn't believe all the movies that he'd been in.
Yeah, I was reading up on him too. And again, like you, he for people who don't know, he's the bad guy in Kindergarten Cop. He plays opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger. And when you're the big scummy villain in a Schwarzenegger movie, you're a big imposing guy. So this guy, Richard Tyson, is this huge hulking actor. And he plays the bully in this movie, and he's really quite frightening in this movie. Like you could buy that he would pound somebody and just murder them at school. And I was reading up on this Richard Tyson actor, and he's from Cornell, he's an Ivy League scholar, and he's a very well-respected acting coach and teaches in Ivy League schools. I'm like, how did that guy become Buddy Revell?
And also, and this is changing the subject a little bit, but all the names are perfect for the character that they are. Buddy Revell is the bully hood, pot smoking kid, and Jerry Mitchell, is the nerdy guy. The names are perfect.
Absolutely. And Buddy Revell is, of course, everybody's buddy.
Right.
People haven't seen the movie won't get that. That's a good joke. Okay. And yeah, you mentioned the star of this movie, Casey Shimachko. It was funny when I was watching this movie for the first time, I was thinking, okay, why have I never heard of it? Why is it kind of forgotten? And I saw, well, Casey Shimachko's the lead. And I'm like, well, that's why, because they couldn't get one of the big name actors of the 80s. So they got this B, the B team of the 80s stars.
Yeah. And he was, Casey was in the Young Guns movie.
Yeah, I had no idea that he was such a significant figure in the 80s. I was looking at his bio, and he's just like Richard Tyson. He's in everything.
Everything. He did a couple episodes of The Blacklist. Mm-hmm. He did, what else did I find? Law and Order he's done.
Well, to the two that really jumped out at me is he's in Back to the Future. A lot of people don't know that. He's one of Biff's little henchmen. He's the guy that wears the 3D glasses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's in Back to the Future 1 and 2.
In the diner.
Yeah, in the whole movie. He's there. And it's funny, the other henchman there is the guy from Titanic, Billy Zane. Biff had some very accomplished henchmen.
I didn't know that about Billy Zane. And yeah, Billy Zane's he's great in a million things.
Yeah. And then
he's rarely the lead, but he's always there.
Yeah, Titanic's like the one time you know who he was.
Right, he's close to the lead, but I had no idea that he was one of Biff's henchmen. That's funny. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'll go even further with this. Casey Shimachko. Not only was he one of Biff's henchmen, then you go to Stand by Me, and he's one of Ace Merrill's. He's one of Kiefer Sutherland's little henchmen.
Man, I did not know that, and I have watched Stand by Me half a dozen times at least, if not more. That's one of my favorites.
So if you were a thug in a movie and you needed a henchman, Casey Shimachko was the perfect guy. And then the movie that I even forgot that he was in, he's in the Of Mice and Men with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich in the 90s. And Shimachko's like the villain in that. Yeah, he's Curly.
But you don't remember him in any of these movies unless one thing I always do when I watch a movie, I will always watch the credits and freeze it because the credits go by too fast. Mm-hmm. And quite often you'll see somebody playing the role of like gun store owner. They don't even have a name in the movie or something. Mm-hmm. And it'll be somebody that's, not yet famous or you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like there's a guy named Bill Simmons has a website. He calls these actors that guys, where you just know their face. You don't know their name. He just calls them that guys.
Like in Terminator at the very beginning, Bill Paxton is one of the goons.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I did. I just learned that recently. He's very young, and it's hard to even recognize him.
Yeah. That's another movie that we should have done. What was it? Bill Paxton was in that movie with Anthony Michael Hall.
Weird Science.
Weird Science, yeah.
Yeah. The problem with that's a John Hughes movie, and I really lose a lot of my street cred if I start throwing John Hughes movies as being underrated 80s classics.
Yeah, and that movie was not underrated at all. That was...
Yeah, it's very popular. Like,
right.
I think most people actually like Weird Science more than I do. It's not one of my personal favorites. But I do like Paxton in it. Paxton always makes me laugh, and no matter what movie he was in.
Yeah, he played Chet, if I remember right.
Yes.
Another example of a perfect name for the character.
Chet.
It wouldn't have worked if his name was something like Waldo or something. It had to be Chet.
Exactly. Okay, so let's walk through the plot of this movie and kind of explain it to people now that we've hyped it a little bit for them. Do you have your notes? You've been watched this movie recently? It's fresh in your head?
Pretty fresh. I did my rewatch about a month or so ago, and so plus I've seen it. I've seen it 10 times or so. So yeah. I'm in good shape.
I'm in no position to sit here and question your knowledge of 3 O'Clock High since I'd never seen it until a month ago. So I will fully defer to you on this one. Okay, so we start the movie. It's and I have to say, this is probably my favorite part of the movie. There's a lot of things I like about 3 O'Clock High, but the opening, and I'll just say this, and it's funny, without me even getting into it too much, people will know what I'm talking about, that it's got to be the most 80s opening to a movie I have ever seen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's exactly like dozens of movies we've seen. The getting ready for school, which kind of reminds me of Varsity Blues.
Uh-huh.
They're going to school in the pickup truck and
some Ferris Bueller maybe in there.
Yeah, and I think 10 Things I Hate About You, I think, also begins with
the montage.
Getting ready for, I don't know.
Yeah, the frantic getting ready for school montage, the manic Monday, if you will.
Right, when you're rolling opening credits and stuff.
Yeah,
it works though. It works.
This opening scene is really fun, and it's funny. I was reading some reviews on Rotten Tomatoes that said, if you can get through the first 5 minutes of this movie and you like that kind of movie, then you're going to love 3 O'Clock High. If you don't like that kind of 80s montage movie, you're going to hate this movie. So like the opening is kind of your litmus test of this is what this movie is going to be. It's just this frantic montage of Casey Shimachko, name is Jerry, getting ready for school, trying to dry his clothes in the microwave, throwing a Pop-Tart in there. And there's this really awesome theme song to this movie. And again, this is the song I'd never even heard until a month ago. It's called Something to Remember Me by Tangerine Dream. And I've had that on my iPod. That's like my workout song now. That song's fantastic. I was shocked I'd never heard the song before.
I've heard it and I can hear it in my head, but I never knew the band or the title.
For people who don't know, that's the song that I opened this podcast with. It played before my intro. It's if you thought it was catchy, then you'll love the song. This movie just has a fantastic opening. It's just a wonderful, quirky 80s opening to a movie. And then, Jerry and his sister and his girlfriend are rushing to school. And Jerry kind of says, it's one of those days. It's going to be one of those days. And he is not incorrect.
Yeah, it's I might have to watch it again tonight just for the heck of it.
Look, I'm even selling this movie to someone who knows it. So this is for the other people who don't know this movie. See, hopefully this works for you too. But Randy knows this movie, and I've already talked him into rewatching it.
And you're right. If about the Rotten Tomatoes comment about if you can get through the first 5 minutes, because the first 5 minutes is kind of stupid.
Mm-hmm. It's very 80s.
And it's none of that funny editing and nothing takes place in the first 5 minutes that is remotely interesting. It doesn't get good until the shot in front of the urinal in the bathroom.
It's all about the urinal scene. That's what we look for in the movies. Okay, so Jerry gets to school, and this is another one of these shots that I really appreciate in this movie. It's one of these things that Spielberg didn't appreciate, but I think it's kind of fun, where there's this rumor already going around school. Oh, there's a new kid coming to our school today. His name's Buddy Revell. He's like this big scary guy. He's killed people. He's stabbed people. He's never lost a fight, and he doesn't like to be touched. And it's the scene where it's like you hear it in passing. People are just having this conversation, and we'll cut from them, and we'll cut to another group of characters talking, and they just continue the conversation right where the last one left off. And it's such a weird stylistic 80s shot that I can see why Steven Spielberg was already rolling his eyes. He's like, no.
Did 10 Things I Hate About You come before or after this movie?
That's after. That's definitely a 90s movie, so it would have been.
Okay, so in 10 Things I Hate About You, you remember the same thing, all the rumors about Heath Ledger's character.
Mm-hmm.
He ate a live chicken and spent 2 years in prison. Exact same thing. So I guess 10 Things copied 3 O'Clock High.
Yeah, and I don't think 3 O'Clock High copied anything. I think it was kind of making up this trope.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this big bully coming to school, and everyone's terrified of him. And again, we went over this in the My Bodyguard podcast, where it's just the way that the grapevine works in high school, that someone new is coming, something's going to happen, and everyone knows about it. And it's funny because that happened to me in high school. I remember this very specifically, that Randy, I'm sure you'll laugh at the story, that these two girls had transferred to my high school. I think it was our senior year. And they were these blonde, hot, model-looking girls. And they were like the hottest girls I'd ever seen. And like the rumor going through the school, by second period, everyone knew that these girls had transferred to the school and they were now part of our student body. And it was funny, by second period, every guy in the school had the hots for them. And by fourth period, every girl in the school hated them and was saying how fake they were. And no one had even met them yet. So I had an experience with this once.
Yeah, it's I don't miss high school. Do you know? I also doing a little research today. I saw that both Casey and Richard Tyson are exactly the same age. They're both born in '61, so that would make them both 26 years old when they did this movie.
Wow. Yeah, this is back in the era when you have a 26 to a 30-year-old playing a high school student, and I guess Shimachko pulled it off because he's kind of small. But yeah, Richard Tyson does not look like a high school student at any point in this movie.
Well, he could have been held back 2 or 3 years.
That's true. Or he could be like a big football star or something. Yeah, you have no idea. Okay, so Casey's at school, or Jerry's at school, and it's just a regular day at school. He runs the student store. He's the manager there, and we get to meet his boss, played by, and this made me laugh when I saw this was
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey Tambor, who there's so many other things people would know him from. Arrested Development is the one that I know. That's the thing that I know him from. He's been in a lot of other stuff. But yeah, so Jeffrey Tambor shows up here with a little mustache, and I'm like, oh yeah.
I remember he was also in the Michael Keaton movie, Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom, he's the scummy boss.
Right, he was Michael Keaton's boss. Okay, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, Jeffrey Tambor, just one of these guys who was kicking around as a character actor for many years. I mean, I remember him back in Three's Company back in the 70s. And so, yeah, he's just kicking around here. He shows up randomly as the manager of the student store. He'll have maybe 4 lines in this movie. But yeah, so Jerry is just this good kid, good normal kid who runs the student store. Nothing really interesting or exciting about him. And very quickly, he's going to be introduced to the bully here, Buddy Revell, who's going to show up. And basically, yeah, this is where the movie turns into a Western, when they'll show these shots of like Revell, the camera is pointing up at him, making him look bigger than he is, or the ominous music. Like, he's just this larger than life, just thug. And he looks like you wouldn't want to mess with him in high school.
And the combat boots and the leather jacket, and
of course, all the
perfect.
the fixings, as they would say. So Jerry shows up and his friends in class are telling him, hey, did you see this buddy guy? Did you see this bully that showed up at school? Like, he's killed people. He's got a knife. He stabs people. And they're like, but he doesn't like to be touched. That's the thing. I've heard if you touch him, he's going to kill you. And so that's really going to be the point of this movie, that Jerry's going to touch Buddy and it's not going to end up well.
Yeah, and Jerry did not hear the part about he doesn't like to be touched, if you remember right.
Okay, so I screwed that up. Randy has corrected me. Yeah, Jerry is the one person in school who does not realize that Buddy has a thing about people touching him.
And I think Jerry was assigned to write an article in the school newspaper about the new boy, Buddy Revell. And that's what they were talking about in the restroom.
Yeah, so this is where we get to the aforementioned urinal scene that Randy is fond of, where Jerry works for the school newspaper. He's been assigned to write a piece on this new kid who has come to school, Buddy Revell. And so Jerry just randomly runs into him in the bathroom. And Jerry knows this guy's a bully, and he knows that he's scary. But Jerry's like, well, I'll disarm him. I'm going to write a story about him for the paper. And Buddy is just standing there at the urinal. And of course, in the boys' bathroom, you don't speak to other people at the urinal. It's a faux pas. I mean, I don't think I have to explain that. Most guys know that one. But Jerry starts speaking to him at the urinal, and then in a gesture of friendship, Jerry reaches over and pats him on the shoulder. And this is where the ominous music starts at the urinal, where Buddy looks down at the hand, just like in a Western, and Buddy says, you touched me. I don't like to be touched. And he's like, I have a lot of anger over this, and I need a way to work it off. We're going to fight, me and you, at 3:00. And this is really, the whole movie goes from here.
Yeah, and you don't spoil the movies in these podcasts, do you?
Yeah.
We don't want to...
Well, we kind of walk through the plot of the movie, and there's a certain point where I'll tell the listeners, if you want to watch it for yourself, stop right here, and don't listen to the rest. So we can walk through it up to that point in this one if you want, because there are some quirks in this movie.
That's fine. I just didn't know how far we should go.
Oh yeah, we did a podcast on the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, and if we got through that one without spoilers, I think we'll be okay on this one. Yeah,
and the whole, I mean, you set the intro for the movie, and the entire movie it goes period by period, from 8:00 to 9:00 to 10:00, and just a funny scene after funny scene with Jerry trying to get out of the fight. And do you remember the one class where they watched the film where they had the insects?
Yes, the crab scorpion eats a cricket.
Right, and that's very Survivor-esque.
It is.
You've seen the TV show Survivor, I think.
I have seen Survivor, yes, as have you, I'm sure.
Yes, I've seen a couple episodes, and and that is very Wonder Years, if you remember that show.
Yes, that's my wife's favorite TV show is Wonder Years. I know exactly which scene you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, they do it all the time where an insect would be. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and again, what Randy's saying is right, that the whole rest of the movie is, and again, if you haven't seen the movie, Jerry is just this tiny little shrimp, and Buddy, the bully, is easily twice his size and could easily kill anybody. And so Jerry is desperately trying to figure out a way to get out of this fight. And so Buddy basically tells him, don't leave the school. I'll find you. We're going to fight at 3. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's really, again, it's the gunfight aspect of this movie. Like at high noon, we're going to have a gunfight, and you better be there. Or I'm going to hunt you down. So yeah. So the rest of the movie is Jerry desperately doing anything he can to get out of this fight.
And I can't believe that I did not pick up on that Western aspect of this movie is, with the title, 3:00 High. Mm-hmm. Just, I'm such an idiot.
I wouldn't have caught it, except I was listening to, they do a 25th year and 30-year anniversary screenings of this movie, and the director will come and answer questions from the audience, and that's where he really laid it out. So it's not something.
Where'd you see that? I'd love to see that.
Yeah, just go on YouTube and look up 3:00 High reunion or screening, and there's all sorts of interviews with Richard Tyson and the director, and this a huge live audience. A lot of people really love this movie that grew up with it.
Yeah, it's a I don't know if cult classic is the right term, but it's loved by not enough people,
Not enough people to make it famous, but enough people that it kind of developed a following on the internet.
Yeah, it's back when it was on, if it was on TV or Showtime or something, if I was flipping through the channels and I would see 30 seconds of it, you couldn't just stop. You had to finish it.
And that's something I've read other reviews of people saying that, if you go to a YouTube video of people talking about this movie, they'll say the same thing. If I see this on TV, I have to watch it. If you see a scene, you see Buddy Revell, you're I have to watch the rest of this movie. It's just one of those things that kind of draws you in the more you watch it.
Right. Even if, now I have my own digital copy that I can watch 10 times a day for the rest of my life if I want to. But if I'm flipping through the channels, and see that it's on, I have to watch it.
Yeah, it's funny how the 80s trains you that way.
Yeah.
Growing up in the 80s, you're a slave to what's on TV at that moment. I have to watch this, even though I own it.
Have you heard that before? You may be onto something there.
I have not, but my background's in psychology, so maybe there is an actual. So we've been Lovost or something. We've been Pavloved into doing this somehow.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's, for whatever reason, it's more fun watching live on your TV as opposed to on your DVR or on your flash drive or whatever.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times my wife has kind of made fun of me because we'll be watching TV and one of the Rocky movies is on and I have to watch it. And she's like, you own that movie. You've seen it 100 times. And I'm like, I'm caught up. I have to see Rocky 2. Adrian's in labor. She may die. Like, it's funny that I feel that exact same way.
Yeah, I do on the Rocky movies also.
Okay, so back to 3 O'Clock High here. We're gonna walk through some of Jerry's attempts to get out of having his ass pounded by Buddy Revell here. So the first thing that happens is Jerry's buddy says, well, here's something we can do to get you out of this fight. We can plant a knife in Buddy's locker. That'll get him kicked out of school. And Jerry's like, that sounds like an exceptionally bad idea that we're going to intentionally inflame the bully and try to get him thrown out of school. And so, blah, 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 bad things happen. It doesn't get him kicked out of school. Buddy finds out that the knife was planted in his locker. And it will be the first thing that does not go well for Jerry in this process.
First of many.
First of many. Okay, so what else? I'm going to kind of skim through some things here. So Jerry's friend tries to plant the knife in Buddy's locker. Then we have a couple film students who have heard that this fight's going down. And again, the grapevine in the school is fantastic. Everyone knows about the fight within half an hour. And now they're filming Jerry. They're like, hey, this would make a great documentary. We'll film you. And then another guy says, hey, there's a betting pool on you, Jerry. Could you last at least 5 minutes or something? If you last that long, I get some money. So again, now the fight's become this larger than life thing that everybody in the school has heard about and they're all excited about. So Jerry is terrified that this bully is going to murder him after school. All the school is ready to cheer it on because they want to see a fight. Because for people who, I don't know if it's like that in schools now, but if there is a fight, if everyone knows that a fight's coming, it's like the biggest deal. Everyone's all excited. Was that your experience growing up as well, that if there was a fight, everyone knows? Absolutely.
And jumping ahead to the end, when the actual fight takes place, they're literally every single student is at the fight. The building has hundreds of students leaning out of the windows and the parking lot is full. It's just, in real life, there might be 50 people watching, but there was, there must have been 1,000 extras on this scene.
Yeah, and the awesome thing is that the school they picked for this movie is like massive. It looks like a big old medieval fortress.
Right, you know where it was filmed, don't you?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. I'll let you reveal it. But the fun thing is, I live in Southern California, and what I love doing when I watch movies is try to pick where this was filmed. And I had the hardest. Yeah, I had the hardest time with this movie because there's these mountains in the background. And the only place in California that has mountains in the background is like where I live out here in the Inland Empire in Upland or Ontario. But I'm like, I know this wasn't filmed here. Where? So my wife and I were trying to pick this out. Is that New Mexico? Is that Colorado? We could not figure out where this movie was filmed. And I will let Randy reveal where 3 O'Clock High was filmed.
I was guessing California as well, because I've spent a little time in Southern California, when you're in LA or Santa Monica or wherever, and the mountains are right there. Mm-hmm. But no, it was actually filmed in Ogden, Utah, and I believe Ogden is a suburb of Salt Lake, is it not?
Yeah, it's a suburb of Salt Lake, and apparently that is a real high school. That's Ogden High School or something like that. It really does look like this big old scary fortress.
But I also read today that it was supposed to be based on the director or one of the producers or something's high school, which took place in California.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it was filmed in Utah.
Yeah, it's funny. There aren't that many movies I could think of that were filmed in Utah. And it's funny if you go to I've just been watching endless clips of 3 O'Clock High on YouTube the last couple of weeks in preparation for this. And it's funny, every time there's a 3 O'Clock High video on YouTube, look at the comments below and it's all these people that say like, yeah, I was there. I was an extra that day, or my brother was there that day. Like it was a big deal that they filmed a movie in Ogden, and it touched all these people's lives. Everyone still remembers that it was this big, massive event that a big Hollywood production actually came out to their town and filmed at their high school. So it was like, this is a movie that has touched a lot of people over the years.
Because there had to have been 1,000 extras in the fight scene.
Yeah, it's huge,
if not more.
So skimming along the movie here, yeah. So Jerry's going to try to leave school. He's going to defy Buddy's orders and go home. And he gets out to his car in the parking lot, and the knife that they have planted in Buddy's locker has been jammed into his steering wheel with a little note that basically says, "You can't get out of this. I'm going to hurt you at 3 o'clock." And so, yeah, there's a whole thing with, okay, so Buddy's car, or Jerry's car has been disabled. Nobody believes him. He starts telling the principal. He starts telling the security officer, the Duker. Yeah, so all these scary, I don't know why they had so many bald authority figures at the school, but everyone apparently is bald, and no one believes his story, and so Jerry's just screwed. It's this classic thing where the adults will not believe him, that he's dead meat, and none of the authority figures are going to do anything to stop it.
Another light bulb just went on off in my head, which is, you remember, I don't know if it happened with this scene. Remember his girlfriend's saying, what does the guy do in the old Western movie to get out of the gunfight?
Yes.
And the answer was, get yourself thrown in jail. And there's another, I can't believe that the Western thing I'm just picking up on now. I definitely have to do a rewatch to pick up on more of these.
And this is the most successful staff picks ever, where I've gotten my co-host to go rewatch the movie, not just the audience.
Well, I hope they watch it, because it really is. I can't imagine anybody not enjoying it. It's just really well done. When he tries to get himself thrown in jail, which is get sent to the principal office. You remember that scene, of course. That was classic. His book report. Yes,
the book report okay. So let's skim through this again. And this is the point in the podcast. I'll just tell people, if you want to watch this movie play out, just kind of stop listening here and go watch the movie, because we're basically going to give away the rest of the movie. But yeah, so yeah, Jerry does a couple things. He hires the star football player to go beat up Buddy. That doesn't work real well, because Buddy basically murders this football player.
What was that guy's name?
Craig. His name is Craig.
Craig. Yeah, I don't think we ever learned. Oh, Craig Matty. Yeah. Played by a guy named Mike Jolly.
Yeah.
Never heard of him. Let me IMDb him, see if he did anything else. Oh my God, he was in Forrest Gump.
What? Who was Mike Jolly in Forrest Gump?
Let me see.
Got to be a soldier or something.
He was a club patron.
Is he one of the guys that yells at Jenny when she's like singing nude on the stage? That must be Mike Jolly.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yes. So yeah, Craig, the football player in 3 O'Clock High, was somewhere in Forrest Gump, and I'm hoping all the fans of Mike Jolly and the family members who are listening will write in to correct us who he played in Forrest Gump.
Her dreams have come true. She's a folk singer.
Yes, she's on a big stage and everything.
Yeah, he's in tons of stuff.
He's that guy.
Yeah, he is.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, Jerry hires the star football player. That doesn't work because Buddy, the bully, beats up the football player, and then what happens? Yeah. So
rewatch that scene when all the bookshelves do the dominoes, and when the last one goes over, the two guys, Jerry and Jerry's best friend, are standing there. You can't see them until the last bookshelf goes down. It's just beautiful.
It's a wonderful shot. That alone would have worked in any John Hughes movie. I mean, that is a fantastic shot, and I agree with you. I remember that scene as well.
And I wonder how many. If they didn't get that on one take, it would take days to set all that stuff back up.
Yeah, you need a domino expert in there to make sure that it's all structurally sound before they do it.
Yeah, because you remember the statue of the knight in shining armor that does a 360 to continue the domino effect.
Yeah, it's a great shot. Any student of physics, that scene will warm your heart. The library scene when the bookshelves all get knocked over by Buddy punching the football player.
Well, and what's so great about that scene? I mean, there's a ton of things that are great about it, but the fight doesn't take. I mean, it's not really even a fight. It's just Craig puts his fingers on Buddy's chest, and then it's over.
It's over.
It's over just in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Classic.
Okay, so Jerry, he's tried to hire the football player. He's tried to flee the campus. He cannot figure out a way out of this. So, like Randy said, the Western trope as well, if you don't want to be in a gunfight, you get yourself thrown in jail. So Jerry tries to get himself detention, and his plan to get detention is during a book report, he's going to smoke in class. And then when the teacher calls him on it and asks if he actually has anything to do, he's going to walk up and make out with her in front of the entire class, which is a wonderful little 80s moment that I hadn't seen in too many other movies. The kid full on making out with the teacher.
You can see in that scene, just how versatile and good of an actor Casey is.
Mm-hmm.
when he's smoking and walking through the class, and it was a good read, acting like a tough guy, and he's like, it was angry, sexual, and the way he looks at the girls, and just classic.
Yeah, that's the one time that, every other moment in this movie, Casey Shimachko has been this little wimpy little dork. But yeah, for like 5 minutes in the movie, he starts playing a bunch of other characters. You can kind of see why they cast him as the henchman in Back to the Future and in Stand By Me. Because yeah, he plays a good little thug. Like I absolutely learned to appreciate Casey from this movie. And like you said, he shows some really good range in this scene that you can see why this guy was in so many movies in the 80s and 90s, and so many people just don't even realize he was in them.
As well, and I'm jumping ahead again, as well as the scene where Buddy Revell insults him and calls him a pussy. Mm-hmm. And you can see the light bulb go on in Jerry Mitchell, and he turns from this nerdy, geeky coward into this badass, not scared of anything. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent, again, the of Mice and Men I keep bringing up, of the scene where Curly walks up and points and pokes Malkovich in the chest, says, "You mess with my wife, I'm going to kill you." Like, it's very similar to what happens here. It's the exact same look that Shimachko gets. It
is, and I'm going to look at a whole bunch of these movies that not only Buddy Revell's in, and mm-hmm. Craig Maddie. I've got to watch Forrest Gump.
Randy's going to be the first person to have a Craig Maddie viewing list on Netflix now.
It's crazy. If you go through the IMDb's, it could keep you busy forever.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have a cameo here that's going to blow your mind if you don't know that she's in this movie. This is the one that absolutely blew me away when I realized who this was. Do you know who I'm about to talk about? The nurse?
No, I do not.
All right. There we go. This is the fun part when I get to blow Randy's mind. So Jerry gets sent to the school nurse at one point. They're checking to see if he's okay while he was making out with his teacher. And the nurse says, "Are you hypoglycemic? Would you like some cobbler?" Which is a weird little scene. That nurse, the actor who plays the nurse, and even if I know it's her, I don't recognize her. That's Large Marge from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's the truck driver.
Large. I only saw Pee-wee's Big Adventure like once, maybe twice, but
you remember Large Marge, right?
I remember the name for sure.
Yeah. The big, creepy claymation truck driver who delivers what I would argue is the greatest jump scare of any movie in the 80s because no one sees it coming the first time. My kids are terrified of that scene. They will not watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure because of that scene. So for those who are scoring along at home, yeah, her name is Alice Nunn. She plays just one of these that guy character actors, and she shows up here in 3 O'Clock High as a nurse, and you would never know that that's Large Marge.
How is she not in this list of actors in 3 O'Clock High? Has 50, and she's not even listed.
Yeah, that's how under the radar she is in this. And again, that blew my mind because I was even looking for her. I saw her in the credits, and I'm like, who is she? And I couldn't pick her out. Even when you know it's her, you don't recognize her.
Did she have a name? Or she was just a school nurse?
Just nurse, I think.
Okay.
Just look for the nurse who offers him cobbler for no apparent reason. Okay, yeah. So,
here we go. Nurse Palmer.
Nurse Palmer, one of her signature roles.
Okay, Alice Nunn. Let me IMDb her. Okay. 3 O'Clock High. Murder, She Wrote. Simon and Simon. You remember that old show?
I do, yeah.
Riptide, I remember that. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Large Marge, Knight Rider, Heart to Heart, WKRP in Cincinnati. She's been around.
Yeah, and there were so many actors just like that of that era. They just you never knew them by name, but they just made a steady living. Yeah, steady living of getting these roles.
8 is enough. The Love Boat.
I don't want Large Marge on my Love Boat.
Yeah. Airport 75. Ironside. Man, she's old.
I believe she may have passed, so I'm not sure we're showing the proper reverence for her. But yeah, that was
Mayberry RFD. That show was in black and white.
That's right. She was terrifying little Opie. She was a little claymation, little terrifying Opie back then.
So she has passed away, you say? Let me see how old. Yeah, she was born in 27. Jesus, she'd be 91 if she was alive.
Yeah, I would assume that Large Marge has passed away because she was old in the 80s.
Yeah, she died in 88, a year after 3 O'Clock High was filmed.
So this was her swan song.
It was.
Well, there you go.
She died at age 60, which is pretty young.
Huh.
Since I'm going to be there in a couple years.
Well, hopefully your swan song is something as majestic as she had here in 3 O'Clock High.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are now in the last day of class, or the last period of class, and Jerry is just a nervous wreck. He knows he's going to get killed. He tried to get in detention. It didn't work. He tried to flee school. He hired the quarterback, star football player. None of this worked. And now basically he
he hired the Craig, and I think he gave him $500.
It was like all the money in the till at the studio store.
It was $450. That's right.
Yeah, so that failed, and so now Jerry has all this money that he had paid to Craig to beat up Buddy.
Jerry's best friend gets $350 back and let Craig keep $100 because he broke his fingers and got a couple of teeth knocked out.
Yeah, for his suffering, he got $100. That was a good price.
Right.
This is pre-lawyers, so that's a good payoff.
So yeah, and this is when Jerry gives the $350 change to Buddy Revell to bribe him. When before he offers him the money, he's like, can't we be friends? Can't we at least just try to be friends? That reminds me of me when I was getting bullied, of when I'm saying, I have no reason to fight you.
Like, you just wanted to be friends.
Right. So let's be friends.
And so you were not able to purchase friends, much like Jerry was not able to?
No, I didn't try to buy him off. Like I said, I just went screaming to the principal's office like a little crying bitch.
Yeah. I would have done that had I even got to that point. I would have just gone home and told my mom. So I did not even have the balls to tell the principal. I'd tell my mom.
Well, I didn't have the luxury of going home and telling my mom, because the fight was going to be right after school, 3 o'clock high.
Yeah, those bullies are inconsiderate like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jerry has $350, and at the end of the movie, this is his last resort. He's like, I'll just pay the bully not to fight me. And so he pays Buddy, and Buddy's like, for $350? You kidding? And Jerry's like, sure, take it. Just don't hurt me. And Buddy's like, okay, I'll take it. But like, you are aware that you're the biggest pussy on the face of the earth, Jerry. Like, we're supposed to be in a fight, and you're supposed to be a man and fight me, and you're so wimpy you won't even do that. He's like, how does that feel? And it's kind of a neat little speech. I like the way that Tyson delivers this one.
Oh yeah, and what else is he? He's like, you didn't even try.
Yeah,
as a great line, and you could just see the wheels turning in Jerry's head.
Yeah, although it's a bit out of character for him, since he has been a pussy at 100% of the time in this movie, and then all of a sudden he decides, I'm not going to be a pussy. But yeah, I will appreciate it.
Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, this is a fantasy.
Yeah. This is not real. Again, I've heard a couple people watch this movie on my recommendation, said, I didn't really like it. And I'm like, kidding. Well, just kind of watch it again. Let it grow on you. That's the thing. It's not going to be The Breakfast Club or 16 Candles. It's not going to jump out at you as this masterpiece the first time. But again, really kind of, it just kind of gets under your skin and you remember it. That's all I can say about it.
You're right. It takes 2 or 3 to love it.
And like I've done 13 episodes of Staff Picks now. This is the movie that I've watched the most times in preparation, and it's still been in my head. Like I said, I've still listened to that song endlessly. This is the one that's kind of been hanging over my head. Like, I really want to do this movie justice because I've been thinking about it more than the other ones.
And it's like Airplane or Airplane 2. Every time you watch it, you pick up on more stuff.
Yeah.
Either things that are in the background, or like, posters in Jerry's room, or and every time you appreciate it more.
Although I wouldn't even say, this is something we brought up in other episodes, that 80s comedies, especially teen comedies, weren't necessarily like laugh out loud. Like, a comedy back then could just be quirky. Like, it's not Airplane in the sense that there's a gag every 5 minutes and you're laughing out loud. Like, just appreciate some of the little details or the little camera shots or the angles. Like, and again, that's kind of what an 80s comedy is. Like, it is funny, but it's in a different way. Like, you're not sitting there laughing out loud the entire time. You just kind of admire this one.
Right.
Okay, so Jerry has been challenged to a fight. He's been called a pussy. And basically, he just kind of snaps at this point and says, I've been pushed around this entire day. I'm sick of this. He tells Buddy, no, forget the money. We're going to fight after school. So there is indeed going to be a fight after school where little tiny Jerry will square off against Buddy. And this is among the more signature scenes in this movie. If you go online on YouTube, there's lots of clips of the scene, the fight here at the end.
Yeah, and the editing of the last final punch where Jerry uses the brass knuckles it's genius. The audio is incredible. Mm-hmm. The use of slow motion, the hair flip of Richard Tyson is just perfect.
Yeah, it's great. It's, again, just a master class. And like you said, you have a background in video editing. There's a lot of little stuff that's done in this scene just to make it more interesting than just a fight scene would have been otherwise.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm going to have to watch it again tonight.
Okay, so we're going to spoil it for you here if you can't guess that Jerry's going to win the fight against Buddy, which is, again, it's a fantasy because there's a 0% chance that would happen in real life. But in the movie, the school disciplinarian comes over, Buddy punches him out, then the principal comes over, Buddy, I forget if he punches him out or threatens to punch him out. Basically, Buddy takes down the entire administration team, and then basically any police and SWAT force that come in are not going to have a chance against Buddy either.
And Buddy also goes to school the next day with no repercussions of assault of the principal and the head of security.
Yeah, you got a warning. That's what that was in the 80s. If you assault the principal and the head of security, you get a warning.
And also another thing that's great is, you remember when the principal's down on the ground and it's the last minute of the fight and the principal wakes up from being unconscious and he screams out, "Don't fuck this up, Mitchell."
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good laugh. So basically there's this big fight. Jerry wins. And again, he wins because Buddy drops his brass knuckles. Jerry picks up the brass knuckles, tags him in the face. It's a good shot. And then again, everyone lives happily ever after. Jerry wins. The hot girl loves Jerry. Jerry returns the money to the student store. He and Buddy become friends. And of course, like Randy said, Buddy was in school the next day. Presumably, I'm guessing because we're filming in Utah, maybe the Mormons are very forgiving towards violence. I'm not sure exactly why Buddy's there the next day. And that's the end of the movie. The theme song starts up again, Something to Remember Me by, and again, that ties into the theme of the movie. And again, it's just one of those cute, quirky 80s movies that, again, I am flabbergasted that I'd never heard of it or even seen it before. And I'm so happy that, Randy, that you brought it into my life, because this is one of those movies that I've been recommending to people now over the past 2-3 weeks.
Good. Well, I told you.
You did. You've done well. See, you warned me about that, Junior. I've been doing this longer than you have, and you did indeed prove yourself.
Did I really call
on
you
this
Junior? That doesn't sound like something I would say.
You might have called me the F word or something. I'm kind of cleaning it up.
Okay. That sounds like something I would say. Okay,
so anyway, yeah. Randy, anything else you'd like to add before we sum up and send our minions off to go watch yet another underrated movie from the 80s?
No, I think we covered it. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to some of your old podcasts. This was fun.
Yeah, it's really fun to dig into these movies with people who grew up with them. Just because you just reminisce, and I always try to get people to tie in stuff from their life and do it. Like, what were you like in school? How does this affect you? And it's really fun, some of the stories that people come up with.
Yeah, and I just love looking at that guy in the credits and cross-reference movies, and every single movie you can be amazed with going through every little bit part.
And then just one small trivia fact. And again, this is because I'm a huge nerd and I just catch stuff like this in movies. I love sharing my nerddom with you. There's 2 different buckwheat posters in this movie in the background, which I just love because in the 80s, that was kind of a thing where Eddie Murphy had played buckwheat on SNL. And then everyone had like buckwheat T-shirts and posters, which appears horribly racist when you look at it now. Like, I have pictures of myself in college with a buckwheat poster behind me, which looks terrible. But that was indeed a thing in this era, 85 through 88. And there are 2 different buckwheat posters in this movie if you care to go looking for them.
Is one that I mentioned earlier that in Jerry's room?
Yeah, one is in Jerry's room and then one is in the student store.
Okay.
So
I do remember the one in the student store because, there's several minutes of the movie that take place in the student store. Okay. I remember it now.
Yeah, I'd like to think that they were selling buckwheat posters in the student store, which is even better, but we don't have a confirmation on that.
Well, 87 would be about the time that buckwheat was at his most popularity with SNL.
Well, Murphy had left the show by then, but there was like a big renaissance in like reruns of his shows and stuff.
Okay, because, I mean, the real buckwheat was back in the 50s, wasn't he?
I think 30s.
But before my time even.
Yeah. And then buckwheat peaked in the 80s. Okay, I just want to thank Randy for joining me. That was a lot of fun, a nice little walk down memory lane with a movie that most people are not aware of. So I'm really hoping you guys give this one a chance. 3 O'Clock High. Again, it's not a John Hughes movie, but it's really the next step down, which is not that far a step, to be honest. I think it's a fun representation of the movies of that era.
It's a different step. It's
a sidestep.
Yeah, it's a sidestep. It's not It's just as good as a Hughes film, but it's different. It's not a Hughes film.
Yeah, it's fantasy. It's kind of a transition into what we're going to see more of in the 90s. All right. As always, my name is Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. You can reach me if you have any feedback, any suggestions at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach me on Twitter at Mario J. Lanza. As always, keep an eye out there for those underrated or underloved movies, and we'll be back in April with some new episodes. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Don't fuck this up, Mitchell!